The first thing I heard was the gravel. A slow, deliberate crunch outside my gate, too steady to be a passing car, too late for a neighbor. I looked out the window and saw two figures in dark uniforms standing beside a black SUV with blue strobe lights suction-cupped to the dash. No markings, no plates. Just the kind of vehicle you'd use if you wanted to look official, without actually being it. The lead, one tall, broad-shouldered, hand resting on a holster, stepped up to my driveway camera. He knocked once, sharp and rehearsed. "Mr. Walker," he called out. "You're under investigation for property code violations and obstruction of an HOA order. Step outside." I almost laughed. Because here's the part they didn't know. I'm the chief of police for the county, not retired, not honorary, active duty. My badge, my ID, my patrol logs all current. I opened the door slowly, still in my gray t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. The man straightened up. "Sir, we need you to come with us," he said, showing a laminated card that could have been printed at a library kiosk. "Really?" I said. "And which department are you from?" "Homeowners Enforcement Division." That did it. I let the silence hang. Behind them, I could see my neighbor, Karen Holloway, standing at the curb in her robe. Arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd just orchestrated a coup. Karen's been president of our HOA for 7 years. In her mind, that makes her judge, jury, and executioner of all property. Matters grass height, mailbox color, fence height by We've clashed before, but this was new. I motioned toward the men's fake ID. "Those badges aren't registered," I said. "You're trespassing. I suggest you drop whatever script she gave you and walk away." They hesitated. Then Karen shouted from the street, "He's non-compliant. Make the arrest." That's when the second guy reached for my wrist. Big mistake. I pivoted, hooked his arm, and guided him gently, but firmly against the side of his own SUV. The other stepped back, fumbling for a radio that wasn't even transmitting. I pulled my actual badge. "Chief Ryan Walker, County PD. You two just committed felony impersonation." Karen froze. Her eyes darted between me and the scene, unfolding like she couldn't decide whether to run or double down. "Ryan," she sputtered, "this was just an HOA security check. You're being unreasonable." I turned my porch light on fully, the camera blinking red above the door. "Smile, Karen. You're on for angles." The two imposters wilted instantly. One mumbled that the board had hired them to enforce resident compliance. The other admitted they were private contractors paid in cash. I called dispatch. Within minutes, 2 real units rolled in, while my officers took their statements. Karen kept insisting she had authorization from the board. She even tried to wave a crumpled HOA letter that referenced Section 9.2, Emergency Enforcement Powers. I knew that I'd read every one. Section 9.2 doesn't grant arrest powers. It allows temporary fencing repair after a storm. Still, she ranted on, red-faced and trembling, until one of my sergeants quietly advised her to stop talking. By the time we cleared the scene, the SUV was impounded, the fake officers were in custody, and Karen had disappeared inside her house. Slamming the door so hard, her porch light flickered out. But I wasn't done. Because something about those men bothered me. How they used the exact citation numbers from my HOAS violation letters, word for word. That meant someone gave them my file. The next morning, I reviewed my security footage frame by frame. License plates, timestamps, faces. I logged everything into evidence protocol. Chain of custody intact. Then I pulled the HOA's latest circular, the compliance bulletin. There it was. Bold print, unapproved structural modifications at 1180 Cypress View, subject to enforcement. My address. They'd been building a case behind my back. So, I made a decision. This wasn't going to be handled with another stern letter or a warning. I was going to build my own case, one airtight enough to hold up in court, with every fraudulent act pinned to its source. And the first step, find out who paid for those fake uniforms and lights. Because if the HOA thought they could play law enforcement, it was time they learned how real law enforcement plays back by sunrise. I was in my garage, sipping burnt coffee and reviewing last night's footage on my laptop. Frame by frame, license plate, Clear as daylight, Texas rental. Registered to Civic Asset Security LLC. Problem was, no such company existed in any state database. I ran it through the national directory. Nothing, no IN, no incorporation records. The name was a shell, but the receipt for their fake light bar that I found. A purchase order linked to a prepaid Visa card billed to the HOA's discretionary maintenance fund. That was my first breadcrumb. I drove straight to the HOA office that afternoon. Neutral ground. Daylight witnesses. Karen wasn't there, but Vice President Dale Granger was. Dale's the type who polishes his golf cart more than his conscience. Always playing middleman, always pretending not to know. "Morning, Dale," I said, stepping into the boardroom with a calm smile. "Got a minute to talk about your enforcement division?" He froze halfway through typing. "Or what?" "2 men impersonating officers showed up at my property last night, claimed the HOA sent them." He swallowed. That's not possible." "Funny," I said, sliding a printed copy of the payment record across the table. "Because this prepaid card was bought with HOA funds, processed through your treasurer's signature." He glanced at the paper, blinked twice. "That must be a mistake." "Maybe Karen," "Exactly," I said, leaning forward. "Maybe Karen." Dale tried to pivot. "Ryan, you know how she gets. She's passionate. Passionate doesn't cover orchestrating a felony." I left without another word. The camera on my dash captured the entire conversation. That night, I started digging deeper. Public records, meeting minutes, archived budgets, anything linked to special enforcement or security. And there it was, buried in last quarter's minutes. Line item 14. Budget. Reallocation. Emergency compliance measures. $8,750. Approved unanimously. Signed by Karen Holloway and Dale Granger. $8,750. Enough to buy fake uniforms, radios, and that unmarked SUV. So I called in a friend, Deputy Inspector Laura Chen, my department's financial crime specialist. Laura's good at what she does. The kind of investigator who can trace a ghost company through 5 shell accounts before lunch. She pulled the HOAS 990 forms, the local filings, even the contractor invoices. Within hours, she had a name, T. Randall Consulting. The same name listed under the fake security company's P.O. box. "That name ring a bell?" she asked over speakerphone. It did. Randall was Karen's brother, former mall cop, fired twice for misuse of authority. Bingo, I thanked Laura and told her to keep the findings sealed under a joint investigation memo. Chain of custody logged. Confidentiality clause noted. Next, I needed proof from inside the HOA board, something that tied Karen directly to the staged arrest. The next scheduled HOA meeting was Thursday night. Open session, recorded for residents. I planned to be there, not as a homeowner, but as an investigator. 2 days before the meeting, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Postmarked local. Inside was a USB drive and a single typed note. "You're not the only one," she tried to silence. "Play this at the meeting." I scanned the drive in a secure then I opened the file. It was a voice recording, time-stamped from the week prior. Karen's voice, unmistakable. "If he won't follow the citation, we'll make him. Get those security guys to handle it. He likes to flash his badgelets. See how he likes being on the other side of it." That was all I needed. Intent, coordination, premeditation. Still, I wanted the reveal to be airtight, public, and irrefutable. So I set the stage. I told Laura to attend the meeting in plain clothes. I also notified the county prosecutor's office that I'd be presenting probable cause evidence related to impersonation and misappropriation of HOA funds. Everything was ready when Thursday rolled around. The meeting room was packed, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee and tension. Karen opened the session like nothing happened. "Welcome, everyone," she chirped. "Tonight, we'll discuss compliance and neighborhood integrity." I waited until the open comments portion. Then I stood. "Ryan Walker, homeowner," I said evenly. "I'd like to play a recording relevant to item 14 of the last budget." Karen's smile faltered. This isn't the proper venue, but I'd already connected my laptop to the projector. Her voice filled the room. "If he won't follow the citation, we'll make him." You could hear the air leave the room. Dale stared at the table. The treasurer froze mid-note. I didn't say a word while the clip played. When it ended, I calmly handed a sealed evidence bag to Laura, who stood and identified herself as County Deputy Inspector. Karen tried to speak something about context and privacy, but the room had already turned on her, and that's when the twist hit, because while everyone stared at Karen, Dale's phone buzzed on the table and my body cam caught the preview notification. Transfer complete. $8,750. Civic Asset Security. Real time. They were still moving money during the meeting. The trap had just closed. When Dale's phone lit up with that transfer notification, the room went dead quiet. Then you could hear it, just the faint whir of the ceiling fan, and Karen's voice cracking as she said, "Dale, what is that?" He didn't answer, because two plainclothes deputies were already standing behind him. Badges out. "Mr. Granger," one said, "you'll need to step outside with us." Karen spun toward me, color draining from her face. "You set this up?" I didn't blink. "No, Karen, you did. I just pressed record 2 weeks earlier." I'd quietly asked Laura to secure a judicial sting order, a controlled evidence operation that allows live observation of electronic financial transfers tied to a fraud case. Every dollar moving through that fake civic asset account was being monitored. And tonight, Karen's vice president had just triggered the final wire. They led Dale out without cuffs, just a quiet escort. Karen tried to adjourn the meeting, claiming procedural confusion, but the residents weren't buying it. Half the room was filming on their phones. One older neighbor whispered she really thought she could arrest the police. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The fallout came fast. By morning, the county prosecutor's office announced formal charges: fraudulent misappropriation of HOA funds, conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement, and obstruction of justice. Karen, Dale, and her brother-in-law Randall were all named. The evidence package, video footage, financial ledgers, voice recordings, and the sting logs was airtight. Chain of custody verified. Timestamps aligned. Every document notarized and cross-signed. I didn't need to testify. The evidence spoke for itself. But I showed up anyway, because I wanted to look Karen in the eye. When the judge read the charges, court day felt like the ending of a long movie. Karen sat at the defense table, still trying to look composed in her pastel suit, clutching a binder labeled HOA Authority. When the prosecutor played the clip of her voice ordering the fake arrest, she flinched like the sound itself burned. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Holloway, this recording is your voice." Karen hesitated. "It's taken out of context." The prosecutor nodded calmly. Context being a felony impersonation scheme. She said nothing. The judge didn't need more. Within 15 minutes, the HOA board was dissolved pending a state audit. Karen was stripped of her title, fined, and ordered to repay every cent of the misused fund, plus restitution for legal costs and damages to homeowners. Randall faced 2 years of probation and a permanent ban from any licensed security work. Dale cut a plea deal and turned over all internal communications in exchange for leniency. Justice doesn't always move fast, but when it does, it lands hard. A month later, the neighborhood looked lighter. The compliance notices stopped. The HOA website quietly disappeared, and the new interim board, made up of residents with actual integrity, voted to install security cameras at all HOA facilities, not to spy, but to protect transparency. One evening, as I walked past Karen's old house, I saw her for sale sign half buried in the yard. She'd moved out under a confidentiality clause. But everyone knew the story. A neighbor called out from his porch, "Chief, glad you handled it by the book." I smiled. There's only one book worth using. Later that week, I sat in my office filing the final report. In the end, the real lesson wasn't about authority, was about accountability. The moment people think rules don't apply to them, they stop being part of a community and start being a threat to it. I flipped the file closed, logged it under case number 251847, HOA impersonation fraud, and locked it in the archive. The system worked. The truth held up. And in a world full of people trying to fake their way through power, Sometimes the cleanest victory is simply proving what's real. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that crossed the line, drop your story below. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, subscribe for more true stories of justice served, one property line at a time.